This is kind of a specific question, taking it back a little bit. But when you're describing a plant growth mission, how, like, from the scale of growing in an environment exactly like Earth, like in a little habitat, to growing in a lunar environment, like where in between that would your goal be?
Well, that's a good point, and it's a technical point about how you do the experiment. You'd probably want to have on your mission a plant growing in as close to Earth normal as you can as a positive control. You'd like to see that grow. There's some things you just cannot change, like the partial gravity. So you'd want to have at least one growth module that is as close to Earth as you can make it. And then you'd probably have a bunch of experiments going out, and you'd probably have one where you know nothing's likely to grow. So you'd have a whole series. I personally would like to see the Earth control, then a experiment where you're using some mixture of lunar regolith or Mars regolith, and then maybe a pure lunar regolith, and then maybe one that's maybe a hydroponics. So you got a whole mix, and that kind of design will be decided by a science team and by the botanists when they finally decide. And they won't fly a rose. Those botanists have no class. They want to fly a Arabidopsis, a little tiny green plant that doesn't even make a pretty flower, but they claim that they'll learn a lot more science that way. So I defer to their superior judgment and inferior aesthetics.
Just a quick side note on that, because since I was watching your presentation before, it was kind of funny. Just a kind of funny story. I had a guy approach me at a foundation conference in LA at the time. His name was Elon Musk, and he had this crazy idea that he wanted to put a greenhouse on Mars. And now I hadn't come across this stuff yet. You probably already had it out there, but I don't. A little ignorant in some of these things, and I had just watched an old movie called The First Men in the Moon, I think it was, where they arrive and there's been the lunar race is extinct that was there, and I sat him on this couch and I said, you know, it's California, so I said, dude, you are. I want to give you a scenario that the press is going to do, the science community is going to do with you, and that you're going to get there, you're going to fly this begonia. I wasn't even thinking roses at the time. But you're going to fly a begonia to Mars, and it's going to be beautiful, and you're going to get all this great press. And 10 years later, the humans are going to arrive, and they're going to find that there was indigenous life, but there was a crack in your glass, and your microbes got loose and killed it. And that's what they're going to roast you on in the public. And unfortunately, that was my first encounter with Elon, but it was great. And he... you know, he went off later and actually saw what the core problem was transportation. But it was funny to see your chart up there saying how you could do it and ameliorate that. So
yeah, he actually did start a project called the Oasis Project to try to fly a plant to Mars. I was involved in it. I tried to encourage him to set his sights a little lower. He wanted to fly the first private mission to Mars, the first low-cost mission to Mars, and the first plant to Mars. I said, you know, he basically wants to do 3 impossible things before breakfast. And I said, you know, if you could do one of those 3, that would be pretty good. You know, maybe you ought to set your sights a little lower. But that's what he wanted to do, and I was happy to help. But eventually, like Rick said, what he eventually realized in that exercise was that he couldn't get a launch vehicle. He spent a lot of money designing the plant growth system. There was a company in Arizona, Paragon, that actually did the design. But couldn't get it. Could launch it, and I don't know if he wants to return back to that vision of sending a plant growth system out or not. Mars is a much harder target than the moon because it's so much farther, and the landing is harder because it has an atmosphere. In that sense, it makes it easier, but it makes it harder because it's less predictable. And so, you know, it's technically a lot easier and a lot cheaper to do a plant growth module on the moon first. So I think that would be what I would push as a way to do it. And if SpaceX wanted to take that on as a goal, I, for one, would be willing to carry water, so to speak, for that goal.
Well, I think both Bigelow and SpaceX have their eyes set both on the moon and Mars, although Elon leans much more towards Mars. I know that the Dragon capsule has his wiring and that type of stuff is hardened and stuff that's comes from geosat type stuff, and he has talked openly about that and wanting to go to Mars.